Under the hush of a sky woven from silver and shadow, the world holds its breath. The moon rises full and unblemished over the forests of Arcadia, and every trembling leaf bows in reverence. Beneath that divine glow, something ancient stirs. The whisper of Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the untamed maiden of the night. Before she is seen, she is felt. The air thickens, the silence stretches. A pulse moves through the forest, faint, rhythmic, commanding. The pines rustle softly as if exhaling her name. The soil hums underfoot, alive with her quiet presence. No temple holds her spirit. Her altar is the living earth. The air is scented with cedar and cold water, touched by the faint sweetness of night-blooming flowers. In this place, all things wild bow to her unseen will. Mist drapes the ground like a veil, trembling in her light. A deer steps carefully through the undergrowth, its hooves silent on the damp earth. Somewhere a stream murmurs, a liquid hymn, and the sound mingles with the whisper of leaves. Every sound belongs to her. Through it all, her essence moves, unseen, unbound, like wind slipping through silk. Artemis is not a figure of shadow, but of radiance subdued, a flame that refuses to burn yet cannot be extinguished. Twin to Apollo, she is his reflection reversed. Cool where he burns, silent where he sings. Her light is gentler than his, but it reaches deeper. It touches what hides, what trembles, what yearns. She is the soft exhale after thunder, the quiet following flame. Her glow reveals without exposing, tempts without yielding. Even as a child, she had asked her father Zeus for eternal freedom, for forests instead of palaces, solitude instead of chains. He granted her wish, but the price was silence, a heart untouched by warmth, a life free yet forever apart. Now she walks beneath her own moon. Bare feet press into the yielding soil, her steps slow and soundless. Her hair falls loose and pale as frost, brushing against her skin. She wears no jewels, no crown, only the whisper of bark and the scent of rain. Yet her presence commands the night. Her wolves pad beside her, eyes glowing like distant stars, their movements an extension of her will. They are her companions and her mirrors, loyal, untamed, alive with the same restless spirit. In her eyes lives the horizon, distant, endless, untouchable. Yet beneath that stillness lingers something unspoken, a trembling that betrays her serenity. It is not loneliness nor desire, but the ghost of warmth she has never allowed herself to feel. The reflection of her brother's sun glimmers faintly within her, a memory of something forbidden, something almost human.
The forest feels it too. The trees lean closer as she passes, branches lowering in reverence or curiosity. The creatures pause mid-step, hearts quickening beneath their fur. They sense the contradiction in her, the purity that tempts, the restraint that burns. Her very stillness invites motion. Her distance stirs longing. She stops beside a stream that mirrors her perfectly. The surface ripples under the faintest breeze, distorting her reflection into something softer, warmer. She watches herself as if meeting a stranger. The image smiles faintly, or perhaps the water only plays tricks with the light. Still, the goddess feels a subtle stirring inside her chest, something delicate and dangerous. From the branches above, a nightingale begins to sing. Its song flows through the darkness like a thin thread of gold, fragile yet sure. Artemis closes her eyes, letting the melody sink into her. It coils through her ribs, trembles along her skin. For a heartbeat, she is no longer the goddess of distance and restraint. She is the sound itself, pure, trembling, alive with something she cannot name. The music speaks of longing, of touch, of hearts laid bare. Though she has sworn herself beyond such things, it moves through her like a secret. She feels it gather in her throat, in her hands, in the space between breaths. The nightingale sings of love, and she, who knows neither love nor surrender, listens as though she remembers. The moonlight grows thicker, pouring down her shoulders like liquid glass. It clings to her skin, revealing without revealing, outlining the sculpted grace of her form. She moves slowly, each gesture like the drawing of a bowstring, restrained, deliberate, full of potential. There is a sensuality in her silence, an allure not of exposure, but of denial. Even her stillness feels alive, charged with the weight of what she refuses to release. A deer steps into the clearing. It lifts its head, eyes wide and unafraid. Artemis turns toward it. Their gazes meet, the immortal and the mortal, bound for an instant in quiet understanding. She lowers her hand, her fingers hovering above the soft fur, close enough to feel the warmth of its pulse. She could touch it, claim it, destroy the distance between them. Yet she does not. The desire to connect burns faintly within her, but she holds it, mastering the flame. That is her divinity, to contain what others would release. Mortals tell stories of her fury, of how she punishes those who look upon her unveiled, but they misunderstand. Her wrath is not born of pride nor of shame. It is the defense of something sacred. She guards not her body, but her essence, the fragile balance between purity and temptation. She is the embodiment of passion restrained at its most exquisite moment, of a heartbeat suspended before surrender.
The wind stirs. It lifts the edge of her tunic, brushing her thighs with a teasing gentleness. The touch startles her, light as a sigh, yet electric. She raises her face toward the moon, her own reflection in the heavens staring back. For a fleeting instant, she imagines being touched not by wind or light, but by something living, something that could answer the ache beneath her stillness. Her wolves circle her, their fur shimmering under her glow. She kneels beside one, tracing her fingers along its head. The warmth seeps into her skin, grounding her, reminding her of the choice she has made. The wolf looks up, its eyes gold and steady, as if it knows her secret longing, the craving to feel more, to step beyond her own perfection. Above her, the moon climbs higher. The light turns sharper, whiter, until the whole world gleams as though dipped in frost. The air tastes of stone and metal, pure and cold. The forest bends around her, obedient to her presence. The trees sway, the stream stills, the night itself seems to wait. She is the axis of this secret universe, the still point in an eternal circle of motion. And yet, beneath the beauty of that stillness, something fragile stirs. A question unspoken but insistent. What would it mean to yield? To let the light she guards so fiercely be shared? To know warmth, not reflection, to be touched, not worshipped. The thought flickers, dangerous and bright, like a spark in dry grass. She inhales sharply, and the world holds still. Then she exhales, and the spark vanishes, or so she hopes. The wind carries it away, but the forest has heard, the moon has seen. She resumes her walk, every step a soft echo in the breathing earth. Behind her, the stream murmurs again, as though sighing with relief. Yet the forest feels changed, aware, awake, holding its breath for what it cannot name. She reaches a clearing where the moonlight gathers thick as milk. She pauses in its center, the world around her silent, suspended. The glow wraps around her like an embrace. In that radiance, she is both divine and heartbreakingly human. Light made flesh, perfection made fragile. Her beauty is not the warmth of lovers, but the purity of untouched snow, radiant, remote, whispering of what might melt it. The night deepens, but she remains still. Her eyes lift to the heavens, her breath blending with the wind. Everything moves within her, and she within everything. For now she belongs to no one but herself, the eternal huntress, the guardian of solitude, the flame that both guides and denies. Yet as the wind brushes her cheek and the moon pours its endless light, there lingers a softness at the edge of her breath, a secret almost ache, a tenderness unspoken. The night wraps around her like a lover who dares not touch. And though the world will call her pure, the night knows better. The night has felt her hesitation. The night has heard her heartbeat.
In the valley below her mountain, where silver light met the dark breath of the forest, mortals often spoke of her, not as a goddess, but as a rumor of beauty glimpsed between trees. They never saw her fully, none dared. Yet one among them, a young hunter named Orion, began to feel her presence not as legend, but as a heartbeat echoing through his nights. He would wander the woods at dusk, bow slung across his back, pretending to hunt while listening for the soft music that came from nowhere. The rustle of unseen steps, the sigh of branches moving without wind. He told himself it was only the air, the forest alive as all forests are, but his chest tightened when the moon rose. In her light, everything gleamed sharper, more alive, as though her unseen gaze had chosen what deserved to exist. Artemis never intended to be known, yet she felt him before she saw him. The human presence moving through her domain with careful awe. Most mortals disturbed her silence. This one seemed to honor it. He walked softly, his spirit curious yet unintrusive, his reverence unspoken. It intrigued her. For all her devotion to solitude, the awareness of another heartbeat in her forest made the stillness richer, deeper. It was a reminder of what she had denied herself: connection. She observed him from the shadows. His movements were measured, almost ritualistic, as if he feared to offend the wild itself. His eyes often lifted to the moon, and she recognized the question that lingered there, the same one that sometimes haunted her own reflection. Is it possible to love what cannot be touched? In the mortal's gaze, she found her reflection inverted, the same longing that burned in her but stripped of restraint. Where she was stillness, he was motion. Where she was silence, he was song. Their natures opposed and complemented, bound by the invisible thread of wonder. Far from that quiet pull, among the Olympians, another watched her too, Apollo, her twin, her mirror of light. To him, Artemis was both pride and puzzle. He loved her fiercely, but never understood her distance. His own radiance thrived on adoration, on the gaze of those who could not look away. She rejected such eyes, choosing the company of shadows. Sometimes, when he looked at her walking under her own pale fire, he felt the sting of her silence, the way her beauty belonged to nothing but itself. He would jest, calling her heart a stone wrapped in silk, untouched and untouchable. Yet even in jest, jealousy flickered in his tone. Jealousy not of a lover, but of one who envied her power to remain complete alone. The gods who adored him could not satisfy him as her calm solitude did. She was mystery incarnate, and even he who shared her blood could not enter the sanctuary of her thoughts. There were others in her company, her nymphs, ageless maidens who followed her through the wilderness. They adored her, and yet even their devotion carried shadows of yearning. To serve Artemis was to live in her light, but never share in her fire. They bathed in her lakes, danced in her moonlight, laughed under her watchful gaze, but when she turned away, the air between them cooled. They felt the distance she carried, a sacred boundary no affection could cross. One among them, the nymph Callisto, dared to love her too deeply. Her admiration went beyond reverence. It was worship tinged with longing. When Artemis smiled at her, a rare, fleeting gift, Callisto's knees would weaken. She tried to hide it, but the goddess noticed. Artemis, though divine, was not blind to desire. In Callisto's eyes, she saw what mortals saw, that dangerous reflection of herself as an object of devotion rather than divinity. It unsettled her, not because she disapproved, but because she understood. For in Callisto's silent worship, in Orion's restless admiration, in Apollo's jealous affection, Artemis found mirrors of her own contradictions. Each sought a piece of her, yet what they wanted was not truly her, but the impossible essence she embodied. Freedom that seduced, beauty that denied, desire that offered no satisfaction. At times, she wondered if her light existed only to awaken longing in others. Was she created to remind the world of what it could never possess? That thought troubled her, for though she rejected closeness, she felt its shadow press against her skin. When Orion's gaze lingered on the moon, she felt it like a caress. When Callisto laughed at her side, she sensed the warmth of companionship. When Apollo's teasing turned into quiet admiration, she recognized his envy of her restraint. Every connection touched her without touching, a dance of distances that burned as softly as moonlight on water. One night, as she wandered near the mortal valley, Artemis sensed Orion watching again. He stood at the edge of the trees, his bow lowered, his expression uncertain. The moon cast her silver across his face, and she saw him clearly for the first time. Not as a trespasser, but as something fragile, breathing, alive with reverence. He did not move, did not call to her. His stillness was an offering, and she accepted it by not fleeing.
For a long moment they regarded one another through the quiet veil of night. His heart beat wildly. Hers remained calm, yet aware. He wanted to speak, but could not find words that would not shatter the sacred air between them. She did not need words. Her gaze was enough, cool, luminous, and impossibly gentle. When she turned away, he felt both blessed and broken, as though the moon itself had glanced at him and withdrawn. Later, the nymphs would whisper that the mortal had fallen in love with their goddess. They would laugh softly, pitying him, but even they could not deny the faint glow that lingered in Artemis's eyes that night, the quiet hum in the air when her name passed his lips. In the days that followed, the forest seemed to change. The air grew warmer, the wind softer, the moon hung lower, brighter, as if curious about her own creation. The goddess continued her walks, but now she felt the forest watch her differently, not as its ruler, but as a story unfolding within it. Every sound seemed charged with awareness, every shadow alive with hidden meaning. And somewhere, Orion kept returning, not to hunt, but to wait, not for her body, but for her presence. His patience intrigued her, his restraint reflected her own. Yet in his waiting, she felt a danger that thrilled and frightened her. For in his eyes, she was no longer distant divinity. She was the promise of touch denied, the embodiment of the longing that defined both mortal and God alike. Artemis began to sense the slow unwinding of something within her. Orion's admiration was not a threat, yet it revealed her own reflection in ways she had never seen. Callisto's gaze, Apollo's envy, the reverence of her followers, all of them now orbited this single mortal's silent devotion. It was as though every yearning that had ever reached for her now converged into one heart that beat beneath her moon. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more, a goddess observing her creation. Yet when she closed her eyes, she could see his face outlined by moonlight, and the image stirred her calm like wind across still water. She was still Artemis, untouched, unyielding, yet the air around her trembled with something new, the first faint thread of connection.
The night had thickened around the forest, rich and pulsing with unseen life. Every branch, every shadow seemed to hold its breath as the moon poured its silver over the sleeping earth. Artemis walked beneath it, her steps soundless, her form a whisper of white among the trees. Yet inside her something moved, something wild, unfamiliar, and perilously alive. She had ruled this silence for eternity, had bathed in its peace and worn it like a second skin. But now it no longer felt like home. It felt like confinement. She sensed the change before she could name it, a subtle tremor beneath the calm, a warmth threading through her veins where once there had only been stillness. And she knew the source, Orion. She did not need to see him to know he was near. His presence lingered in the air, soft as the breath of wind against the leaves. A mortal, and yet his heartbeat seemed to echo louder than the entire forest. His admiration had been quiet at first, reverent, but reverence, she had learned, could grow into something dangerous. She found herself drawn to the lake, the mirror of her solitude. The moon rippled upon its surface, trembling with every exhale. She knelt at the water's edge, watching her reflection quiver, half divine, half woman. For the first time, she could not tell where one ended and the other began. "What is this, Artemis?" she thought. "You who swore yourself to freedom, to untouched skies and sacred silence. Why does your heart stumble at the thought of a mortal's gaze?" But even as she chastised herself, she felt it, that pulse, that secret longing beating just beneath the surface of her calm. A sound broke through the hush, a footstep, soft, hesitant. She did not turn. "You should not be here," she said. "I know, and yet I am." He stepped into view, the moonlight catching on his face. There was no arrogance in him, only wonder. She felt his gaze like a touch, though he did not move closer. "You walk on sacred ground," she warned, her tone a blend of restraint and something far softer. "Then let me tread lightly," he murmured. "I seek only to see what the gods hide." The words settled between them like falling petals, delicate, irreversible. Artemis's chest tightened. He was not like others who had sought her. There was no conquest in his eyes, only a yearning that mirrored her own, though she dare not name it. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "Yes, and still, I do not fear you." That startled her more than any threat could have. Fear had always been her barrier, her armor. Without it, she felt exposed, not as a goddess, but as something fragile. Mortals should fear gods, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Perhaps, he answered, but how does one fear the light that guides him? Her breath caught. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. You speak too boldly, she said. Then tell me to leave, he replied. Silence stretched. She wanted to say the word, to banish him from her presence, but it stayed trapped in her throat. The truth was, she did not want him gone. His nearness filled the air with warmth, with pulse, with life, a reminder of what she had always watched from afar, but never touched. Orion, she said softly, tasting his name like a secret. You walk a path that ends in ruin. If it ends beneath your moon, he whispered, then let it end. She turned toward him, and for the first time their eyes met fully. It was not fire she felt, but recognition, as though she had known him long before this night, as though some part of her essence had always awaited his arrival. The moon cast them both in pale gold. Her heart, that immortal, untouchable heart, began to tremble. You see only what the light allows, the goddess, not the cost. Then show me the rest, he said simply. The simplicity of it disarmed her. He was not asking to claim her, nor to worship. He only wanted to understand. And in that desire for truth, she found herself undone. She took a step forward. The air between them shimmered. Every instinct told her to stop, but every breath drew her nearer. Do not come closer, she whispered. He haven't moved, but you have, she breathed, in here. She touched her chest lightly where her pulse betrayed her. The confession startled her as much as him. The goddess of restraint had given voice to what she could not control. He bowed his head slightly. Then let me go if it is your will. And she could not. Her silence became its own answer.
He raised his gaze again, and she saw in him something that frightened her more than desire. Gentleness, the kind that does not demand, only waits. It was that patience that undid her resolve, for in it she felt the echo of her own loneliness. You tempt what even gods avoid, she said, her voice shaking. I tempt nothing, he replied. I follow light. Yours happens to be the brightest. Her lips parted, but no words came. The forest trembled with the sound of water lapping at the shore, of wind through the leaves. She felt the world narrowing until it was only this, him, her, and the unbearable space between them. She reached out, not to touch, but to feel the air that trembled between them, the fragile thread holding balance over a chasm. The warmth of his presence brushed against her skin, and she shivered as though from cold. You should fear me, she said one last time. I do, he answered, but not enough to forget you. And that was her undoing. Something within her broke, not her vow, but the illusion that she had ever been free of longing. She stepped back, swallowing the ache rising in her throat. The moonlight trembled over her features, revealing a flicker of emotion she could not hide. "You cannot stay," she said quietly. "I know. But you will return." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You already know the answer." When he turned to leave, she did not stop him. She watched him disappear among the trees, his silhouette fading into the silver mist. The night grew still once more, but the stillness was no longer the same. Artemis stood alone by the lake, her reflection rippling. The water carried the ghost of his shadow, fading with each wave. She touched the surface with trembling fingers, and the image shattered into shards of moonlight. "You are the moon," she told herself, untouched, eternal. Yet tonight the light felt warmer, softer, as though a single heartbeat had entered its glow. The goddess who had denied all longing finally understood the truth. Purity was not absence of desire. It was the strength to carry it, to feel it burning and still remain whole. She lifted her gaze to the heavens. The stars shimmered like the quiet remnants of what had almost been. And somewhere beneath them, a mortal walked the earth, carrying the reflection of her light in his heart. For the first time, Artemis felt both divine and human, a being made of distance and ache, of silence and song. And though she would return to her solitude, the memory of that night would forever tremble beneath her calm, as constant as the tide she ruled. The moon watched over her, serene, eternal, and quietly changed.
The forest held its breath. The night that had once been hers alone now trembled with memory. The echo of his voice, the heat of his nearness, the pulse she could not command. Artemis walked beneath the moon's pale gaze, yet the light no longer felt cool. It burned softly upon her skin, as though the heavens themselves remembered what she had tried to forget. She reached the clearing where she had last seen him. The air was still heavy with his presence, as though his soul had lingered among the trees. The grass bent beneath her bare feet, dewed with starlight. Every sound seemed to move through her body, the whisper of branches, the faint hum of insects, the slow rhythm of the wind. The world, alive and trembling, mirrored her. For so long she had been the untouched one, distant, pure, the embodiment of restraint. Yet now she felt undone by what she had denied. Desire did not burn her, it dissolved her. It was not a fire of flesh, but of being, as if each breath tore at the veil between divinity and something achingly human. She tilted her face upward. The moon hung close, immense, luminous, her mirror, her witness. "Why do you shine so brightly tonight? Is it joy or pity?"
The light seemed to pulse in answer, spilling across her shoulders, tracing the curve of her neck. Every drop of radiance carried warmth, every breath carried memory. Orion's voice still lived in the hush, his words echoing through her chest. You are the light that guides me. Her heart, that immortal, steady rhythm, began to stutter. She pressed a hand to her breast, as though she could still the tide rising within. But the more she resisted, the more she felt it, that wild, ancient ache she had buried beneath vows and silence. Suddenly, a breeze swept through the glade, stirring the trees into song. The leaves shimmered like small mirrors, and for an instant she saw him, not in body, but in vision, a phantom of warmth, a memory of gaze. Orion stood at the edge of the clearing, his form woven from light and shadow. Her breath caught. "You're not real," she whispered. "Then why do you tremble?" The voice was not heard so much as felt, a vibration beneath her skin, deep and resonant. She turned toward the vision, though she knew it could not be him. He was far away, a mortal among mortals. And yet the world itself had taken his shape, as if her longing had become flesh through nature's will. The air shimmered, the scent of pine thickened. The night wrapped her in a heat she had never known. "You linger where you should not," she murmured. "And yet I was called," the voice said softly.
She closed her eyes, trembling. "I did not call. You felt, Artemis. The world heard." Her breath faltered. The truth stung. For all her vows, she had summoned him, not with words, but with desire that the earth itself could not ignore. The phantom stepped closer. The wind circled around her, lifting strands of her silver hair, brushing her cheeks like invisible fingers. She did not move. The air was alive, electric, sacred. She could feel the forest responding. The rustle of the trees deepened into rhythm. The ground beneath her feet warmed. The stars flickered in cadence with her pulse. "Why do you come to torment me?" she asked. "To remind you," the voice said. "Of what?" "That even the divine can ache." Her knees weakened. The truth struck through her like lightning softened by rain. For centuries she had hidden from this ache, mistaking silence for peace. But this trembling, this warmth, this surrender to feeling, it was not destruction, it was revelation. She took a step forward. The light that formed him flickered, alive and near. She reached out, not to touch, but to feel the space between them, the air that quivered with impossible closeness. Her fingers brushed nothing but warmth, yet it filled her hand as though she held the breath of life itself. A shiver coursed through her. The goddess who had faced storms and beasts now trembled before the shape of her own longing. "Orion," she whispered,
The name broke from her lips like a confession. The wind sighed in answer. Her chest rose and fell, her breath shallow, uneven. She felt her divinity falter, not fading, but transforming. No longer cold light, but something living, pulsing, tender. The moon's glow turned gold around her, softening the edges of the world. You were not made for this, the voice murmured. And yet, she said, her voice trembling, I am this. The words surprised her. They were not resistance, they were acceptance. The world responded. The forest swayed as if exhaling. The lake beyond the trees shimmered like molten glass. Every leaf, every petal leaned toward her, as though all of nature recognized the truth. The goddess of the hunt had ceased to run. She closed her eyes. The phantom warmth wrapped around her shoulders, and in that embrace of air and light, she felt both infinite and terribly small. For a heartbeat, she was no longer Artemis the untouched, but a woman lay bare before her own soul.
Her body moved with the wind, her breath sinking with the rhythm of the earth. The moment was neither mortal nor divine. It existed between. The boundaries that had defined her, purity, distance, restraint, dissolved. In their place came unity. The air hummed like music without sound. Her hair brushed against her skin, her heartbeat quickened, her senses sharpened until the whole world felt inside her. The scent of pine, the cool kiss of moonlight, the faint heat pulsing in the air. She felt everything, and in feeling, became everything. The forest itself seemed to glow. Flowers unfurled, though no dawn had come. The lake rippled, though no wind touched it. The animals hid in reverent stillness. The goddess stood at the center of creation's breath, trembling with beauty, overwhelmed by the miracle of her own vulnerability. "Is this love?" she asked the night. The voice replied, distant now, softer than silence. "It is knowing." And she understood. What she felt was not possession, not desire for another, but the merging of what she had always divided, her mortal empathy and her divine restraint. The ache was no longer pain, it was connection. She did not need to touch him to be transformed. The yearning itself was the bridge. Her eyes opened. The vision was gone. The glade was empty again, the air still. Yet she could feel him, not as a ghost, but as part of her breath, her pulse, her light. The moon above seemed to weep and glow brighter, bathing her in radiance so pure it felt like touch. She knelt, pressing her palms to the earth. The warmth that answered was not from below, but from within. She had carried the fire all along, hidden beneath vows and fear. Now it rose through her veins, not consuming, but illuminating. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not of sorrow, but of release. It fell onto the ground and vanished, leaving behind the faint scent of rain. The forest exhaled, the night sighed, the stars above seemed to hum in harmony with her breath. Artemis lifted her gaze once more to the moon, and for the first time it did not seem distant. She saw herself reflected there,
the hunter and the hunted, the untouched and the yearning, the divine and the human, all of her united in one sacred trembling. She smiled, faintly, her lips parting as though whispering a prayer only the wind could hear. "I understand now," she murmured. "To feel is not to fall." The moon's light shimmered, softer, as though bowing to her realization. The goddess stood tall once more, her heart beating in rhythm with the night, the forest alive in her presence. And in that stillness, sacred, sensual, infinite, Artemis finally knew the truth she had always feared. The divine was not untouched by desire. The divine was desire, pure, vast, and eternal.
Dawn approached softly, as though hesitant to disturb what the night had witnessed. The first pale threads of light wove through the canopy, kissing the dew-laden leaves and turning them to silver. The forest, once alive with tremor and breath, now rested in reverent calm. The storm within her had passed, leaving behind a silence more profound than peace, a silence that listened. Artemis stood at the heart of it, bare feet pressed into the cool earth, her skin still carrying the ghost of the moon's warmth. Around her, the world exhaled. Every creature seemed to sense that something had shifted, not in the air, but in her. The goddess who once walked untouched among mortals and gods alike now bore a trace of something unspoken, something vast and unreturnable. She drew in a slow breath. The scent of pine and wild mint filled her lungs, grounding her. The night's fever had burned away, leaving clarity in its wake. Her pulse, once wild and uneven, now beat with quiet strength, a rhythm she could no longer separate from the world's own tune. She lifted her hand, watching the faint shimmer that lingered upon her skin. The light did not come from the moon or dawn, but from within her, subtle, living, like the final glow of embers refusing to die. She wondered if this was what mortals felt when love had left them changed, not destroyed, but rearranged. For the first time, she felt the weight of her solitude without resistance. It was no longer a vow, but a space she chose to inhabit, vast and sacred. The ache that had once frightened her now moved gently through her, like the memory of music after it fades. The huntress began to walk. Her bow hung lightly at her shoulder, her quiver silent. Each step stirred the mist curling around her feet. The world seemed to follow her motion, leaves trembling, air thickening with awareness. Yet she was no longer the untouched goddess who ruled these woods through distance. Now she moved as one who belonged to them. A stag appeared ahead, its coat glimmering with dawn's first gold. It regarded her with calm eyes, unafraid. She met its gaze, and for a heartbeat they breathed together, creature and deity, equals beneath the sky. Then, with a slow tilt of its antlers, it turned and vanished between the trees. She smiled faintly. There had been a time when such a creature would have fled her scent,
sensing the divine that hunted. Now, even the wild saw her differently, not as the master of the forest, but as its pulse. She came upon a stream, its surface veiled in mist. Kneeling beside it, she looked into her reflection. The face that gazed back was unchanged, moon-pale skin, eyes of liquid silver, and yet it wasn't. There was a softness now, an undertone of something human that glimmered behind the divine stillness.
Her own reflection seemed to ask, "What will you do now?" She touched the water, sending ripples across her image. "What I have always done," she whispered, "but now I understand why." The words felt strange on her tongue, not a vow, not a command, but acceptance. She rose again, the wind catching her hair, carrying the faint echo of her voice through the trees. Far above, the moon lingered pale against the lightening sky, reluctant to leave her side. It had been her companion for eternity, her mirror and her guardian. Now it seemed smaller, almost tender. "Have I betrayed you?" she murmured. The moon did not answer in words, but the wind stirred, brushing against her cheek like forgiveness. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. She thought of Orion, not as he had been in life, not as he appeared in the vision, but as something now etched into the fabric of her being. His name no longer burned, it glowed. He had become a constellation, a story written in the sky, and she, the moon that watched over it. The thought did not ache, it soothed. In his absence, she had found a presence deeper than touch, the quiet knowing that connection need not bind to endure. She smiled, small and true. The night had taken something from her, yes, but it had also given her back to herself. The forest stirred with morning sounds, wings unfolding, branches stretching, water murmuring its endless hymn. Life continued, so did she. As she walked toward the rising light, her steps made no sound, yet the world marked them. Flowers turned subtly as she passed. The mist curled around her calves, reluctant to let her go. Even the air carried her scent, wild, cool, luminous. She reached a ridge overlooking the valley, where the horizon blushed with pink and gold. The first ray of sunlight reached her face, warm and almost startling after a life of silver light. She blinked against it, feeling it seep beneath her skin. The sun was her brother's realm, and for the first time in ages she did not shrink from it. "Orion," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. "Do you see me?" In the silence that followed, she felt his warmth pulse faintly through the air, as if the world itself had nodded. For once, the light of dawn and the glow of the moon did not compete. They mingled, gold over silver, fire over mist, a harmony born from contrast. She stood there, caught between them, and realized that this balance, fragile, luminous, was her truth. She could be both, the untouched and the touched, the hunter and the hunted, the divine and the desiring. The forest behind her shimmered, the trees whispering like an old prayer. She turned once more to look at it, her sanctuary, her reflection, her witness. There would be other nights, other moons, other silences, but none like this. Her fingers brushed the bow at her side. Its wood felt warm, alive. She strung an arrow, more ritual than need, and raised it toward the sky. The movement was graceful, reverent, a gesture of closure and of offering. She loosed it. The arrow soared upward, vanishing into the golden blue expanse. A streak of silver light trailed behind it, fading slowly until it became a star. "Run free," she said softly, watching the glimmer disappear. Perhaps that was her final act of defiance or devotion, to let go, to give shape to her longing and release it back into the sky. The wind rose once more, sweeping around her in spirals, lifting her hair. It smelled of sea and cedar, life and renewal. She breathed deeply, and the weight that had clung to her chest finally lifted. The huntress turned away from the sunrise, stepping back into the cool shelter of the forest. Her path was hers again, yet her pace was slower, more deliberate, as though she listened to something new in the silence between heartbeats. Behind her, the world shimmered awake. Ahead, shadows waited with open arms. She smiled as she entered them, her figure dissolving into the rhythm of leaves and breath. The goddess of the moon, the hunt, and the untouched wilderness had returned to her realm, but she no longer moved above it. She moved within it. And though her vows remained, they had changed shape. They were no longer walls to keep desire away, but temples built to honor what she had learned, that to feel deeply was not to be defiled, but to be divine in a new way, raw, luminous, infinite. The forest swallowed her presence, yet her essence lingered, woven into every sigh of wind, every glint of light that danced across the water. Those who wandered her woods in years to come would speak of moments when the air itself seemed to pulse with tenderness, when moonlight felt like touch, when the line between mortal and divine blurred into a quiet shimmer. They would say Artemis still roamed there, unseen but near, her spirit softened, her heart forever echoing the night she let herself feel. And when they looked up at the stars and saw Orion burning bright, they would notice how the moon curved close beside him, not in sorrow, but in serenity. A goddess who had once loved, and through that love had learned to be whole. The moon rose again, vast and pale, as though nothing had changed, yet everything had. Its light spilled across mountains and sea, touching the world with the gentleness of a memory that refuses to fade. Beneath that glow, stories were whispered,
Some said Artemis had grown distant, others that her light had softened. But truth does not live in words, it lingers in silence. High upon her sacred hills, the goddess watched the earth breathe beneath her. The same silver air, the same endless canopy of stars, yet all of it felt different. Once she had believed divinity meant distance, that to remain untouched was to remain whole. Now she knew purity was not the absence of feeling, but the courage to feel without being undone. She looked down upon the world, rivers pulsing, wolves stirring, hearts awakening in sleep. Every life, every fleeting spark moved her. For the first time she understood mortals not as fragile echoes, but as mirrors. Their longing, their tenderness, their hunger for connection. It was the same force that had stirred her heart beneath the moonlight. She closed her eyes and breathed. The wind carried the scent of pine and salt, smoke and rain. It flowed through her like blood, binding her to the world she had once watched from afar. She felt infinite, not because she stood apart, but because she belonged utterly. Once she had feared surrender, the softening, the unraveling. But surrender had not broken her, it had revealed her. What she had resisted was never love itself, but the truth that even gods craved to feel alive. She thought of Orion, his laughter among the trees, his gaze lifted toward her as though she were the light he had always sought. He had not wished to possess her, only to understand her. And though the stars had taken him, something of him remained, the thread he had pulled within her, the awakening of a quiet human need to be seen. To be seen is to risk becoming real, and she had been seen. When she looked now toward the constellation that bore his name, she did not grieve. The ache had softened into something purer, recognition. He was the hunter eternal, she the guiding moon, bound by memory, not possession. A wolf howled from the valley, its cry rising like prayer, not for mercy, but acknowledgement. She listened, feeling the pulse of its life within her own chest. That cry was the sound of all living things, the hunger to love and still be free.
Artemis answered not with words, but with light. The moon brightened, silver spreading over forests and lakes. The world shimmered under her touch, not in command, but in communion. Her vow had changed meaning. It no longer forbade love, but protected its rhythm. She was no longer the untouched goddess. She was the balance between desire and restraint, between fire and stillness. Her gaze wandered to the horizon where sea and sky met without end. The two reflected one another, touching, never merging. That was her truth, to draw near without losing form, to love without surrendering the self. The air tasted of calm, of rain about to fall. A mortal might have called it peace. She knew it was something more fragile, acceptance. Eternity, she thought,
is not built from endless time, but from moments that never fade. One glance, one trembling breath, one unspoken confession echoing forever. That night in the clearing, when she had stood trembling before her own desire, had become part of her eternity. The trembling was her truth. Below the forest swayed, leaves whispered her name, not with reverence, but affection. She smiled faintly. The wilds no longer served her. They were her reflection. A stream carried her image downstream, scattering it into ripples. Perhaps a traveler would glimpse her face and feel something stir, a longing unnamed. She would not answer. That was her gift now, not to command, but to allow. The stars wheeled slowly, the night breathed with her, alive and endless. Artemis lay upon the moss, hair spilling like moonlight. She gazed upward, unafraid of the vastness. The divine heart, she thought, is not cold. It is wide enough to hold contradictions, light and shadow, distance and desire. That is what mortals forget when they speak of gods, that divinity is not perfection, but wholeness. To be divine is to contain the impossible, serenity and hunger, solitude and love, silence and music.
The moon climbed higher, tracing her form in pale fire. She closed her eyes, feeling its glow seep through her skin. Within it lived every soul that had ever called her name, the lost, the fierce, the tender. They sought not purity, but permission to feel without shame. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Let them," she whispered. "Let them love and ache and never be ashamed." The wind carried her voice across the sleeping world, through valleys, over rivers, into dreams. Somewhere, a woman lifted her face to the moon and felt courage bloom. Somewhere, a man stared at the stars and understood that longing was not weakness. And so her myth endured, not as warning, but as remembrance, that the sacred is not untouched, but fully alive. The night deepened around her, serene and infinite. She pressed her palms to the earth and felt its pulse, steady and sure, the same rhythm that once frightened her. Now it was her anchor. The goddess of the hunt had set down her bow, not in defeat, but in reverence. Her silence was no longer the silence of distance, but of depth, the stillness that listens. The moon shone brighter one last time before thinning toward dawn. As its light faded, she rose, weightless, dissolving into the rhythm of the forest. Those who sought her afterward said they could feel her presence when moonlight touched the skin like breath, when solitude felt sacred instead of empty. They said the trees grew gentler then, and the stars trembled with memory. For in that stillness Artemis remained, not as goddess to be worshipped, but as a feeling beyond name, the quiet ache between freedom and longing, the shimmer of beauty that lives after surrender, the unspoken truth that the divine and the human have always shared the same pulse.